Hello, hi, my panelists. Welcome. I'm gonna introduce y'all, and I would love for y'all to talk about your, connection to this topic on building diverse product teams. So, Dan Corbin, Principal Product Manager at HEB. We'll start with you. Hello, welcome.
Thanks. So yes, I'm a Principal Product Manager at HEB. I'm also a coach at Product Hired, and I teach product management at General Assembly. And this is something that I'm very passionate about. I've worked with different companies on how to improve this process, so lots of thoughts.
Yeah, awesome. And Dan, you also have a meetup group too, if anyone else is not a part of it.
Product League, meetup.com. Get there. We've got a great session coming up on AI, and we have career conversations. It's fantastic.
Yeah, awesome. And Martina Hahn, CPO at The Zebra. Welcome.
Hi everyone, I'm Martina Hahn, CPO at The Zebra. Very excited to be here. So my background, I started in sales. I was horrible, but loved the user perspective, and then moved into product management. And now I manage both the design, research, and product team at The Zebra. And my connection to this topic, it's very personal. I've had comments made to me in terms of like, oh, you don't look like what I expected. I can tell you other stories as well, and so.
What does that mean?
Well, I am. So this was in Germany, and I am part German, and I have a German name. It's like very German, Martina Hahn. And when I used to do sales, it was over the phone, and so when I would meet clients in person, they would be surprised that I am part Asian, and also that I'm tall. So. Got a lot of biases in that one. So I am very much focused on building diverse teams because I think it just makes the product and the world better.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Martina. Anjani Anud, welcome, Senior Product Manager at GoDaddy.
Hi, everybody. As Samantha mentioned, I'm Anjani, working at GoDaddy, very new to GoDaddy, joined 5 months ago, but have been doing product management for about 6 years, and also had a very haywire journey to product management. Started as an analyst and then pitched an idea at my previous company to the senior leadership team. It was like an incubator, and the idea got selected, and that's how I pivoted to product management. Loved it, and so that's what I've been doing. Diversity in product management is important to me because, as a person of color, I've been told that, the way I talk, the way I speak is not how, would be, it's not, it doesn't come across as what people in the Western world would expect. So I've got that feedback a lot, and I'm trying to educate people that, I'm not here to speak your language. I'm here, I have a perspective, and I'm here that, I'm here and my perspective should be heard, and my opinions matter.
I love that, thank you. And finally, Adam Zedler, Head of Product at Chipper. Hello.
So Chipper is an app that helps folks navigate their student loans with federal repayment and forgiveness programs, as well as chip away at their student debt to pay it down faster. My personal connection as a tall white male, I have not had to deal with a lot of the biases and impacts, but student loans disproportionately impact women and people of color. And so it's been a passion of mine as I've joined Chipper to build a company that reflects our user demographics. And kind of brings those ideas and backgrounds such that we're creating the best experience for our target users.
Awesome. Let's get into it. So just building and maintaining diverse teams. I mean, you're all kind of product leaders in your own spaces. So how has that journey been for you, and especially too in the last couple of years, as we've just become more and more aware of this, and it's become more top of mind as we lead our product teams. So. Whoever wants to jump in.
Kick us off, Martina.
Great. Building a diverse team, it comes from the top. I think it has to come from leadership first, right? And I think it's really, and it comes from the company culture. So if your company culture doesn't value inclusion and diversity, then it'll be really hard for you to make the case to hire people that are diverse. So as a C-suite last year, for instance, we spent some time thinking about what do we really want our core values to be. And we landed on 6, one of which is inclusion. So I'm really proud that we landed on that one and made it very explicit that this is something that we need to focus on. And then it also goes back to business need. What's your business need? Who do you need to hire on your team? And then can you, for instance, think about associate level? I think entry-level positions are always great to bring in a lot of diverse talent because a lot of people just don't even get the chance, even though they have 100% transferable skills that make them totally qualified for the job, but they may not have had the title. So it's a really great way to get people in. And then I think in terms of keeping the team and really growing from within, it's about a levels framework. It's about making sure that people understand what do they need to progress in their career at this company, and that it's based on obviously living the values, but also based on the impact that they have.
To add to Martina's point, about coming from senior leadership at my previous company, one of our values was actually diversity and inclusion, and actually senior leadership was encouraging people, to take diversity, equity, and inclusion training, which actually focused a lot on understanding different cultures and diversity and perspectives. That was the whole course on, there was a whole course on diversity and equity because, leadership realized that, as a global company, it was important for people to understand diversity and how different cultures react to different situations. That was important, and, it became a core as a global workforce and also in a remote setting because, when you talk, different people might say things which you may think that, they're being rude, but actually it's just that, that's how the way they talk and how it comes across. It was important to understand that. And what we saw was that, in some European countries, there was a whole, how do you say it, like there was a whole, like a progress where it say that European countries, like people of those countries or nationalities, people are more assertive. They can they can come off as a little negative, but that's not. They don't mean negative to you. It is just that their culture is like that. However, with Asians, it's more that they're quiet. They avoid conflict. So it's important that you ensure that everybody has a seat on the table, their perspectives are heard, and they can share their opinions without being judged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So to your point about having leadership really kind of emphasize it as a priority, I think that that's incredibly important. And hopefully, if you're working at a company and they're good leaders, they recognize that diverse teams make better products, and it's better for your business. There's studies out there that show that when you have more women and people of color on your board of directors, you're going to have better success. And we definitely see it all the way down to the product teams. And one of the great ideas, I think, is establishing onboarding for people so that they can get the opportunities that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have had. So I know at HEB, we've recently launched something called the Level Up program, where so we have 130,000 partners working in stores around Texas, and there's a lot of really incredibly talented people, but how do you make that transition from the store into HEB Digital? And so they set up this program so that we can hire 500 people. And I know as a product manager, if I can get someone that is working day to day and can empathize with the customer and really knows what that customer journey is, and then they can bring that knowledge in and help develop products with that kind of knowledge and empathy, it's going to make us so much better. But I think it's too easy to just kind of continue to go look at the regular candidates and people that look like us and not really do the hard work of being deliberate about diversity and inclusion, which is why I think companies should really publish their results. Like if it's a value, you should put it out there and just say like, all right, this is like what percentage we have in terms of gender and race and leadership. But
I actually just posted that on LinkedIn this morning.
There we go. There we go. I'm just setting things up for the Zebra.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But that's good. More people should be doing that. More companies.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as a product person, you're taught to kind of build your empathy muscle. And I think it kind of starts with having an empathetic leadership team, empathetic kind of company culture, as well as just being aware of those inherent biases that you have. There's a ton of tools that can kind of offset some of those things where you can be name blind, photo blind as you're going through the hiring process, where you can kind of take these things out. But you have to have a team that recognizes that, understands that it happens, and you got to figure out and be deliberate about avoiding those biases. And then as you hire, as you bring folks on, re-emphasizing that as you bring on more folks. We went from 3 people for most of 2021 to we have 12 in Austin and 15 worldwide. And we were talking earlier about kind of how do you maintain that culture. And it's something that you have to address, you have to be deliberate about. You can't just assume it's going to cascade down. And again, it starts at the top or it starts at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. I would add too, I know it comes from leadership, but all of us play a role in that too, right? Every single one of us can educate ourselves about some topic within diversity to help make sure that we have better conversations. I mean, I was just in the lobby and I overheard someone, I don't think they're in this room, but they were making a comment about, oh yeah, this colleague's going out on parental leave, and they were joking about we're being worried about a timeline, right? And it's like, are you being inclusive to your colleagues who have children and have to balance family needs and work?
Yeah.
Right, so there are little comments that we all make that are called microaggressions that can really change the way that someone feels like they belong at a company. And that's something that all of us can do to help make sure that our team is diverse, but also stays diverse.
Yeah. That's great. Is there anything, what else have y'all done on a personal level, I guess, to check yourselves in that way as a leader? Have just from that introspection work or, books or how have you opened up your feeds, things like that? Does anyone have anything that they've been working on?
I think my favorite has been, and this is kind of across all sorts of things, is self-deprecating. And so just being aware and kind of being transparent about where you stand and asking for feedback, asking for people to tell you when you step out of line or you do something that's wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think creating that transparency, creating that openness and saying, I know I'm gonna probably, I might say something wrong or I might not know, and please help coach me, and then taking that feedback and actually acting upon it. I think that creates a really good atmosphere, and then it also pushes you to get better and constantly improve yourself.
I also think how you spend your time and where you dedicate your resources needs to reflect, if this is something you believe in, then you need to do it. So I definitely have made it a point to go out and mentor, look for people that oh, you know what, she could be a great addition to this team, but she doesn't have maybe the product fundamentals. And helping give them the tools, give them the roadmap. So because I do a lot of coaching and stuff, I often describe it as my journey into product management. I felt like I was dropped in the middle of a maze. Harry Potter fans, Goblet of Fire, you know what I'm talking about? And you have to find your way through and it's all dark. But now I can give people a map and a flashlight. And it's still up to them, but they have the skills, they just sometimes need the tools. So I think you need to really set goals for yourself in terms of how you're going to contribute. And then in terms of, I really liked your point about the intrinsic bias that we often have and the idea of having a blind audition in terms of our interview process. Mm-hmm. We did that at my last company through a company called Gap Jumpers, and it was phenomenal. It helped us so much, and it just really was actually kind of scary at how much bias we had. So one candidate, so we were hiring an engineer, and one candidate had been managing a CVS for 10 years. And her resume would have never made it past the first round. Would immediately been weeded out. And it was down to her and a candidate who he had 2 master's degrees and done robotics and all this cool stuff. It would have been a no-brainer. But in the end, when we had them go through and we looked at their code, hers was better. So there's ways that tools and services out there that can help you, even though but you should also kind of personally be working to overcome those as well.
Yeah, resume screening is always an interesting one when you're going through and you say, okay, this person's out, and then you have to stop and say, why are they out? What about it made me pause? What about it? And I think that self-questioning is super important. The tools are helpful, but you're gonna have to have that core second guess yourself sometimes in a positive way. Second guess yourself.
Yeah.
I think one thing I just really want to advocate for is no education requirements on job descriptions. That is the easiest way that we can discriminate, and it's the easiest way that we can be inclusive. And so something that I always do when my teams are looking at or like looking to hire, and they ask me to review the resume, it's the number one thing I flag. I'm just like, just cut it. It's absolutely not necessary.
My team has been, we've been partnering with our recruiting team to write, more inclusive job descriptions. So we are taking that step, and we're also utilizing a tool which actually grades our job description of, how well or how bad we did in terms of, including the language of belonging in our job description. And I've heard positive feedback, because, recruiters do say since we started using that tool, it's helped us, get rid of our unconscious bias that we have, as you're mentioning about adding, educational qualification. And also, it's attracting a lot of candidates from, different backgrounds. So that's helping us, like using the tool, including language of belonging and inclusiveness in our job descriptions.
Let's talk about some, when we've got homogenous teams building products and where they can fall short. We were talking about this before in our pre-panel session. So where have you seen some homogenous product teams fail, and identifying why they failed and learning from that?
I can start. So about 2 years ago, I think we discussed this, that companies came out with the pledges of Black Lives Matter, and they attached the logo. And to be clear, I 100% support that. I see myself also as an ally to my Black friends and colleagues. But what happened was, at the time, the company I was working for, they came out with a statement, they also attached the logo. And what they did was they attached the logo on all their global websites. It's a global company. They attached it across all websites across the world. And what we saw was that, in Asian countries, our users came back asking, like, what is this? We don't understand this. Perhaps we realized that, they could not resonate with this, and, they didn't know what was happening, and, they had other things that were going on in their country that, they had to deal with. That was more important to them, right? And, this was, just a bias that came from the team that, it should, we support this and we should just release it because everybody's doing it. Did not resonate very well with the users because they were coming back, as I said, like what this means, and they were like, this is what I expect from your company, like this is the goal I'm trying to get, like I don't understand why you're putting that banner. So this was just an example of a bias coming from the Western side of the world. And it could have been avoided pretty easily by educating yourself. And when we look around ourselves, as Martina mentioned, that there are people around you. You can just go up to them and talk to them. You'll always find people within your company that are diverse. It's just a matter of just walking up to them, understanding about their culture, and educating. It's just that easy. So in my opinion, that could have really been avoided. Like just stepping up, talking to folks from diverse ethnic backgrounds, and just avoiding what we did.
So if that checkpoint had been there, yeah, that's interesting.
We had, I was at Capital One in their consumer bank group in their new product development team. And so we were tasked with figuring out ways to bring people into the bank, new customers. And so we kind of landed on this product around going on group trips and splitting expenses and being able to sort it all out. And it was a team of mid-20-year-old folk, or we were all guys at that time. Kind of all socioeconomically in the same bracket, living in the Bay Area. And it was one of those things where for us, that's a pervasive problem. We go on trips probably monthly where we're splitting expenses, we're getting Airbnbs, we're doing that sort of thing. And this is an example where the homogeneity actually failed the business need, which was, this isn't a super pervasive problem. When it happens, there's a strong pain point that happens, but most folks don't go on group expense trips, more than annually or biannually. So it was an example of our bias around kind of our personal needs and our personal experience. We sought out interview candidates who had these trips recently, and we kind of blinded ourselves to a question of, is this even a problem for most people? And so I think your biases can be socioeconomic, they can be racial, they can be geographical, like where you are in the world. So there's different kind of cuts and ways to split it.
Just to piggyback off a travel example, this is back in the day when I used to work at a travel comparison site. And we were a fairly young product team. We were all in our 20s, and none of us had a family. And so we were very much focused on just building an experience for a single ticket, a single flyer, or maybe a partner, but not for families. And so when we finally talked to our customer service team, the feedback they got was that they get a lot of complaints from families, especially people that are kind of the planners in the household, because the price on the website is misleading. They always assumed the price was for the entire family, but really it was for the 3, 4, 5 of them, and it had to be quadrupled or whatever. And so I think that was just really good learning that you need to think outside of yourself. You need to think outside of what are your immediate needs and who are you. You need to understand who are your users and what do they need and how do you build something for that. I left the company since, so I don't know what they've done since, but if y'all check out my LinkedIn, you can figure it out.
There's some companies that have had some pretty spectacularly embarrassing product fails because they've lacked diversity. And probably have some ideas out there. I know there's been some Instagram filters which were like, okay, you really should have talked to people of different ethnicities before you use that. Or there was one, I know there's been some apps that have not really worked for left-handed people. And then there's also, I think there was a company that built automatic faucets. And it was fine if you were white, but if you had certain skin tones, it didn't work. So
It's crazy.
yeah, that's really messed up. But what I typically see is not things at that level of huge failure. What I often see is kind of what Adam was alluding to is you're projecting out your own self-image. And this is where I call out a lot of our product managers and designers, especially with their personas. I'm always like, do you notice your persona really looks like you? And so I was at an email company, and they were building out this app, and it was an app that it essentially turned your emails into PDFs. We know how to do that. That's easy. But all of their personas and the people they were interviewing were millennials, and I'm like, guys, who's going to use this product? It's your mom, it's your dad, it's your grandma. So that's the sort of inherent bias. And that's why, as someone who is now in his 50s and eligible for my AARP card, I also think that it's important that you have generational diversity as well. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I see all the time lacking in product groups. And I think so many of them could benefit from it. Especially at HEB, we have all sorts of shoppers. But we don't I'm the designated oldie on the product team, so probably could
Dan's
use help.
birthday was last week.
50 in 5 days, so there we go. Still ARP, still looking for that email.
Well, happy birthday, Dan.
Thanks.
I think the generational one and then the UX side is always an interesting one. Mm-hmm. We have a super wide age range as well of folks who are just out of college and then folks who unfortunately have had student loans for 40 plus years. Who are looking to retire and they still have this debt on their books. And so it's been interesting as we build out these user experiences, we have to just aggressively default to kind of core tenets of how things are designed. Avoiding heavy animation or kind of weird drop downs or things you have to have very clear affordances of click here, this is a button, not this is a card and people will just click around and figure it out. And so I think there's some implications kind of across the product as to how it's built when you start widening, what your personas look like.
Mm-hmm. And I'm throwing this one out at y'all too. But how do you also convince maybe other stakeholders too to stop building for themselves, and if they potentially are pushing things for their own agenda, and maybe you have to start to say, hey, I need you to check your bias. But how do you start to introduce that to other folks that you're working with outside of your product team that you're building for?
I think that happens at our company a lot, where I think the leadership team has a strong perspective, and which is great, we should. But I think my expectation is always from research or from the team themselves to come back with the data, right? Come back with telling us like who is our user, who are we building this for in terms of the personas, but then also what's the data telling us in terms of engagement, and then did we analyze the data based on demographics or whatever personas, and just really get down to the granularity to push back. I think at least at our company, data speaks very loudly, which I think is great, and I think that's important. So just be armed with that information and be able to push back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's also the interpretation of that data, right? It sounds like you have to be keeping that in check. Yeah.
Yeah, I would add to that. Yeah, basically it's just looking at the data and different demographic and geography, and also talking to our users of different segments. So we try to talk to our users who are of different segments. Somebody might be a beginner or somebody might be a pro. So it just gives us different perspectives of how people use our product, so that we can tailor our product for the audience so that it's easy for everybody to use it and not just one person.
One thing that I've seen that is really effective is show the pain points. And so I, as a product manager, my philosophy oftentimes is an acronym fishy, like fuck it, ship it, let's go, let's move fast. However, sometimes that, so in the case I'm thinking of specifically here is accessibility. You can put things out really fast, but if you don't go and test it and look to see like, all right, if you are a blind person, how is this going to look? So we had we have weekly town halls, and we showed videos of people trying to use our app that had different types of disabilities, and everyone was like, oh shit, it sucks. But then we showed what it was like, the experience after we fixed it. So that actually showing the pain and helping, especially with product people, if they're empathetic, and you show like what it's like to be in that customer's shoes as they're trying to use your product, that seems to really hit home, and definitely hit home with leadership as well, because we don't get pushback when we say, hey, we're going to take an extra sprint to make sure that we run all of our accessibility tests before we go live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think painting it with data, the personas, and highlighting kind of what those pain points are. I'll say as a product manager, or as a kid in high school, I never thought I'd be doing as much creative writing as I do in writing out personas and trying to incorporate and really make these colorful stories of who this person is, what their background is, how they got there, why it's so frustrating, all that stuff. And then you can sprinkle in kind of the data points as well to bring it back and kind of show that you've done the research, that this isn't just a subjective assessment. That's actually one of the most fun parts, because it's where you get to be creative as a product manager of how do I convince somebody that this is a real problem that I've seen. And so there's a bunch of tools in the arsenal, but creative writing has been one that I never anticipated I'd be using as much as I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so where have y'all seen success on a diverse product teams? There's going to be a lot more friction, but within that friction is how we build better products, have more success, and innovate. So where have y'all seen that as product leaders, with some examples?
I've seen it, so at one company I was at, it was a very kind of homogenous team, and we ended up realizing we had groupthink. So we deliberately mixed things up, not only the product, but the engineering team as well. And that just, not only in terms of gender and race and age, but just experiences, because, and it made our overall discussions just so much better. They were bringing different perspectives in, and we were able to kind of look at the problems in different lights. So, that's kind of like an ambiguous one, but it's that day-to-day like interactions. It isn't like one specific event. It's just when you have the diverse team, you're just starting off, you have a much better foundation to build from.
I think you can also gauge it on like how healthy the discussion is. Mm-hmm. I think in terms of, I ran the numbers this morning to see how diverse my team was, just because I was curious. And I would say like we're actually predominantly female, and like it depends. I looked at leadership, management, and then also IC roles. So I think it was on the management side, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I think we're like 70% female, but then like 25% BIPOC, and then on the IC side, it was like also 60 and like 20 or something like that. And so, I mean, I think the numbers are okay, right? I'm not necessarily going to say like, I'm proud of where we are, but I think there's a lot of room to grow. And I think, first of all, like also take a look at like how diverse is your team? Like look at the hard stats, and then look at beyond age and race. Like, is it age? Is it experience level? Whatever, and then just mix and match your teams, right? Like if you have the opportunity to place people in different departments, then do it. If you can switch things up to create more discussion, and then also set the expectation that discussion has to happen, that collaboration comes through discussion. And I think we've seen a lot of really good things happen where, especially at the Zebra, because we're a company that supports everyone, our researchers are bringing perspectives from people that are every socioeconomic level, every race, every anything, and being open to that and bringing that into your work, and then also listening to phone calls of users trying to buy insurance and getting that empathetic first like hand experience can really help drive that conversation. So to Dan's point, it's not necessarily like we built something that was so unique or so different, it's that we practice it every day, but we actively have to remind ourselves to continue practicing it as well.
I think the collaboration and kind of working towards like the correct solution is a big one. I think there's this fallacy of, sometimes folks expect product managers to just throw gold out every time. Every idea is going to be a hit. It's going to be a great product, like Abhishek mentioned. And it's not. We have tools and ways to help guide and get to the right solution, but that friction is usually where you get the best outcomes. And so one of the things that we've had really good success on at Chipper is diversity of job function. So having customer support, having our partnerships folks, different engineers in the room in the conversations when we're going through and ideating. I have a background in financial services, and so being asked those very base level questions of how do ACH transactions work, how do bank accounts work, and having to go through and explain it, and then realizing where like my assumptions that I've held, is to be so true. Oh, it doesn't make sense when I have to explain. This is a crazy proposition. And so I think having that to go through and explain and get everyone to the same level is also a healthy exercise to get to a better outcome.
So as I'd mentioned before, we don't expect like product managers or anybody to bring one particular skill set to the table. And so this expectation should also not be there when it comes to their background or demographic. So everybody, as Adam mentioned about collaboration, so allowing everybody to speak and share their opportunity is important. So just one example I'd like to share. We learned with some demographics that we assumed that email, when somebody's creating an account, everybody has email nowadays. But what we realized is that digital world is pretty vast, and products are built for everyone, and they need to be built by everyone. So in one of the demographics, we realized that people said they don't use email. They use messaging apps like Line or other messaging apps, and that's what they actually use to get their business done. So this was a very good realization for us, because we were thinking that, hey, when anyone's coming to our platform, they should have an email, or they would have an email. So we had to think through and just change our entire interface to remove email as mandatory, but also have people use their phone numbers to log in. So this was, and this could happen because everybody was open to that idea that let's collaborate, let's talk to our users, what do they want?
Yeah, awesome. All right, I'd love to open this up to the room too for questions for our panel. Yes. Hello. Yeah, you. Yes, you. Yeah, you. Please stand. Please stand and introduce yourself too. This is a warm room.
Hey, my name is Anna. I'm a senior product manager at Zella, and I'm an immigrant. I moved to the US 5 years ago.
We have a microphone for you too.
Let's get started from the beginning. My name is Anna. I'm a senior product manager in Zella, and I'm an immigrant. I moved to the US 5 years ago, and every company talk about diversity, but when I was looking for my first job in the US, even having 3 years of experience in Russia, that was really pain. So nobody could consider me as a product manager here in the US. And I've heard that many times, that finding the first job even if you have a job experience before in different countries, is a pain. So why do you think that happens, and how do you handle it if you do in your company? Thank you.
I mean, it's obviously a bias that people have, right? It's a native bias. I don't know, I just made that up, but that sounded right. You know? And yeah, I think that's very real. I think, you know, in terms of what you can do about that, it sounds like when you're applying for those companies, those aren't the companies for you. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you really want to work for a company that isn't open to immigrants? Right? I'm an immigrant too. I actually don't have, Margot and I were just talking about this, I actually don't have US citizenship. I just have a green card. And so I definitely can relate to that, especially when it comes to my parents. But yeah, I would say like focus on the companies that are open to having conversation with you. Just don't get discouraged. Focus on your role, what you've accomplished, what you can contribute to the company, and then look for those companies that will take you. Because if they're not open to you, then that's not where you want to be in the first place. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I'll say on this topic is, and it also kind of goes along with the concept of ageism, is there's we're all familiar with when you're younger, you can get an internship. There are these things that a lot of companies have adopted called returnships. And it's essentially like if you have taken time off for healthcare, elder care, self-care, like childcare, or if like in this case, a lot of the people that I see that are benefiting from returnships are spouses of people that moved to the United States for their job. And they have their own experience, but they kind of were struggling to kind of get that foot in the door, and they didn't come here like with a job in place. So returnships have been a really great on-ramp for them to be able to say, hey, let me come in for 3 months. Most of these returnships are like 3 months paid. Show that I can do the job. And then I know the company that I work with, the nonprofit Path Forward, who does returnships, they have over 80% of the people who do returnships end up getting hired. So I think that like it's important for companies to be looking for these different populations and these different ways to kind of access and work with these groups. Because if you do that, like the whole panel's been saying, like you're going to end up being a better product team and a better company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, we got someone in the back.
Hey there, my name's Andrew Stevens. I'm a senior product manager at Lyra Health. And I have a question for Dan and then another question for y'all. So Dan, I'm curious, since you're the principal product manager at HEB, how do you manage maintaining the tradition and culture that HEB exemplifies through Texas while still exhibiting diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging? And then for the other folks, I'm curious, in the new pandemic era, how do you maintain this, this concept of DEIB while there's so much cultural conflict happening in our world?
So fortunately, I mean, HEB is a woman-founded company. We've been around for 120 years. And for me, my job is actually fairly easy because it is ingrained in the company culture. However, I have, had to make sure, and I'm going to embarrass somebody in the room right now. So I just hired somebody on our product management team. Hi, Yannette. It's good to see you. So Yannette has a very different background than most of our product managers. She has worked in the stores for 8 years. She has put herself through college. She is first generation American and has, as she's putting herself through college, she's helping support her family. But her background is so critical for what we need on our product team, because I haven't worked in the store. Like I've been behind, she's actually worked in the pharmacy. She's run the front end of entire stores, knows more about the HEB customer than I ever could. So I have made it a point to make sure that when we are going out and we're hiring associate product managers, that we're looking for people that have the different backgrounds and that maybe otherwise, would have a difficult time making that transition from the retail space into the digital space. But if you give them the opportunity, you're going to benefit and reap the rewards. And this is something like I have an engineering director who I think she started either in the bakery or the meat department. And now she's running essentially all of the back end data for like a online management or order management system that does $4 billion a year. So I think it is ingrained at HEB, and so I've been able to, it's been easy for me to implement it because it's part of the culture.
To your second part of the question, honestly, I think what's been happening the last couple of years just brought everything that happens in everyone's personal life into work. And I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Like, I don't think it's a bad thing that we are now talking more about race and just trying to open our eyes to kind of what is happening. Because I think when there were protests happening, whatnot, that is happening during work hours, right? So like, how can you possibly shut yourself off to anything that's happening in the news, anything that's happening to your community, and just pretend like everything's totally fine at work, right? It's so difficult to do that. So I think it's just really, I actually embrace where we are right now, because I think it's important that we do have the conversations and are open to people kind of bring those conversations to work in a respectful manner. And I think it's also important to recognize and reach out to your peers and let them know, like, hey, listen, like, I may not know what you're going through, but I'm here if you want to talk about it, right? Or like, I'm here to support you. I am an ally. And that's all you have to say. You don't have to ask any questions. You don't have to do anything else. It's just create that environment and let them know, like, I'm here to support you and I'm glad you're here.
I think it's kind of flipped some of the narrative of before it'd be the exception to have a DEI program or an officer or somebody who focuses on that at the company. And now I think it's weird if you don't have that, which I think is like awesome that there is a focus. And so, vote with your employment in some regards. Like, don't work at the companies that don't have a focus on this. If you recognize they are, not allowing folks to take time to participate in, functions and things that they need to do, like, it's probably not a place you want to be.
Yes.
As someone who's hiring, I think one of the easiest things that you can do, in theory, is to open up the pool of candidates to a diverse pool. If you're going to hire 15 people, make sure that's a diverse group of folks. However, the normal channels like AngelList and LinkedIn, and I can't think of the huge one here on 360 right off the top of my head. Oh, yeah, sorry. Do you guys have any tools that you use to ensure that you can bring in, a diverse group for a job that you're hiring for?
So at my company, we're using a tool called Text.io. So basically, when we write a job description, it rates us about how well we are doing in terms of like adding the language of diversity and belonging. So that's helped us in attracting a diverse pool of candidates. And the other thing is that when I was hired, my manager also advocated for me because I did not have the direct experience for the product, but had a slightly different experience that they were looking for. But she was an advocate for me because, for her also, like, mentoring people of color is important. So I think having a company that not only lists that as the value, but also, like, having somebody who's advocating for you also plays a role in that. And you can mostly gauge that in your conversations with the recruiting team.
We've been using RecruitBot, which scrapes from kind of a bunch of different sources, but it's got a lot of, so like it removes names just as initials. There's like no photos or anything. And then it also has different search criteria based on, did they attend like an HBCU? Are they parts of, different organizations? So you can kind of have some more explicit filters there. The downside is they still have to have a presence on those sites, but it helps kind of collect a bunch of those together and then gives you some more cuts and filters there.
At the Zebra, we believe in getting into the community. So for instance, we did recruiting fairs at Houston Tillotson. And so I think, just think about who are you trying to attract and like where do they hang out from a career perspective or like career growth perspective, and how can you kind of get yourself into that community? A lot of those communities have an online website or some kind of presence, whether it's on Facebook or anywhere else. So I think that's also just a great opportunity for you to be proactive as a hiring manager and to kind of make yourself known in those spaces.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think we have time for one more question. Yeah. Thank you, Caitlin, for running.
Hello, everybody. I am Tyler. I work in product at WP Engine. My question is, how do we hold our leaders accountable within our company to improve diversity metrics and even establish goals if they haven't already, and to make sure that that's tracked over time so that they can be held accountable, and especially in the case where the leadership may not necessarily have the diverse people outside of the DE&I kind of a role.
Great question.
At my previous company, we had weekly meetings with our senior leadership, and they encouraged questions. And what worked was that we had Slido, which we were using, and people would just ask them questions openly about what they thought about what was going on in the world. So that was a good forum for, as you mentioned or you asked about holding senior leadership accountable. So they may not always have the right answer. I mean, they may not always have the answers at that point, but they always got back to us. So that's what worked and was nice, that, actually allowing people to have an open door policy and asking questions. And that made senior leadership also more aware of what was going on around.
Honestly, this morning was the first time I looked at the stats of my team. Like, I was very conscious of, like, my leadership team I know is very diverse. It's 3 people, and I work with them on a daily basis, so I know it's like 60% or 65, whatever, 2/3 women, 2/3 people of color. And the C-suite is, I work with them on a daily basis as well, but I think, like, looking at the numbers, right? Take a look at the numbers and ask your leadership team of the numbers and ask them for goals. I just listened to a talk by Michelle Obama yesterday, and she was saying, like, we're all capable people of reaching or accomplishing goals, so why not make this a target? And I definitely plan on bringing that up with my C-suite in terms of, like, hey, team, like, this is what my team looks like. What does your team look like? How do we feel we're doing, and what can we do about that?
Yeah, I don't know that there's like a specific, this is the exact right way or this is the exact right number, but I think calling it out and saying, we're 10% female or something, like, and calling that out to leadership and saying, is that what you want? And if they say yes, maybe that's a different conversation that you have to have with them, but there are some objective truths here. And so, if nobody's looking at the numbers, it's kind of like with products, if you're not looking at the metrics, it's not going to get better. So I think calling it out and just getting those conversations rolling.
I think, Dan, you alluded to it before, like publishing your data. So that's also, in a way, holding them accountable. Like, you publish, like, are you paying equally to people of color, women, and everybody? So that's also important. And my company, I think, does that. Like, they released a report where they say for every $1 a man earns, what are women earning, or what are people of color earning? Like, for every $1 a majority earns, what is the minority earning? So, and then they've set goals, like where we are and where we want to be.
Awesome. Well, we're going to finish up the panel just for time that we have. Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm sure you want to maybe chat after. We've got a coffee break right now until 11. So thank you all so much for, I think this topic has obviously been top of mind and really critical for us. So I learned a lot today around, failing your business, failing your user, and making sure you're not failing your team in this way. So thank you all so much for all these real world examples and some tips. All right, y'all, we'll see everybody back at 11. Thank you all so much.